Thank you for joining us today on Plan Today, Own Tomorrow. I am not our normal host, Gary Thurman. This is Bobby Futch. I'm filling in for Gary. He's on assignment today, but like usual, I'm here with our my good friend and advisor, Tim McDermott. Good morning,
sir.
Tim. How are you?
Good morning. Fantastic. I think we're talking about something important today.
Yeah, we've got a good show today I'm excited about. We're going to talk about the biggest retirement myths and retirement mistakes.
Yeah.
So this is going to be kind of a conversational show. We're going to go back and forth. Everybody hears things from their friends, family, internet, television, social media nowadays.
Some of those people have never helped anybody retire.
Yeah, that's right. So there's a lot of information out there about retirement. It's really too important to base your decisions on opinions, assumptions, that sort of thing. So we're going to go through some of the biggest ones that we hear and talk about pretty regularly today. I hope it helps some people out. So.
Yeah. You and I deal with families every day. We talk to them about Social Security, taxes, estate planning, income planning, the whole 9 yards, right? I mean, the ins and outs. How many people do you think we've helped over the last, one rolling year?
That's quite a bit. We're lucky enough that we get to see a lot of folks. It's probably several hundred.
Yeah. And I mean, we've seen scenarios from I want to spend it all to I'm never going to spend any of it, and anywhere in between, right? Mm-hmm. I think we just hear myth after myth of, I heard this is true, I heard that's true. Hopefully we can debunk some of those today and give you some updated good advice on what's going on.
Yeah, let's start with the first one, Tim, and we hear this a lot. We usually work with, folks that are approaching retirement, but I think that just kind of feeds into this first myth, and the first myth is, I have plenty of time to plan. What do you think about that?
No, we hear that all the time, right? And here's the thing. Here's what we normally see. I think people hear this and they think, well, you're in your 20s. You're probably not going to save for retirement. You're going to go spend your money on a new car or buying the house or, the fun toys that you wanted to have. Actually, what we really see is that 20-year-olds are really good about investing in that 401k. Yep. But then life happens, right? Mm-hmm. And what happens after that? We're tight on money. We need some. We end up emptying that 401k, and then we have to start all over at 35, 45, 55, right? Yeah. And I understand life happens, right? But that's why it's so important to make sure we're investing in the 401k, but also outside of that to build an emergency fund that we can access when we need it.
Yeah, that's huge. We talk about our red, green, and yellow buckets of money here at Guardian Investment Advisors. And really the first one you should focus on is that yellow bucket of money, and that's your emergency fund. You should really have an emergency fund, set aside so you don't have to go to those retirement accounts.
Bobby, I got some interesting numbers here.
All right.
I want to show you if you had started investing at 35, 45, and 55, what the value of your account would be by age 65. This kind of proves the time value of money, the compound interest story that everybody talks about, right? So if you started investing $500 a month at age 35, by age 65, you'd have an estimated account value worth $1.13 million.
It's not insignificant.
That's just based on what the S&P average return has been since its start. And then at 45, you'd only have $380,000. At 55, you'd have $103,000.
Wow.
That tells you how important it is to start investing early.
I think it's also important to point out, too, because you made a good point earlier. When you're in your 20s, you're probably not making a whole lot of money. Maybe you have some student loan debt. Sure. You probably got a car note, all these sorts of things. So maybe you can't save $500 a month. I get it. Listen, money's tight for a lot of folks. Start with something.
Yes.
Right? And that's just not for 20-year-olds. If you're 35, 45, 55, like you just talked about, go ahead and get started.
Yeah, part of what makes this so powerful is that there's $500 a month every month going into it without fail, right?
That's right.
Being consistent, and really your 20s shouldn't be about becoming a millionaire. Your 20s should be about creating good habits. And to your point, right, put something into that account every month. Have the habit of putting something away every single month.
Yeah, and I don't think it's ever too early to go talk to a professional.
Agreed.
Right? We do this fairly often. Folks that, are just getting started, younger folks, come and see us, say, hey, what should I be doing? And, maybe it's not an appropriate time to work with a financial advisor, but you can get some good advice. So plenty of time to start planning is the first myth. You should start planning, what I always say, the best day was yesterday, the second best day is today.
Yeah,
right?
That's right.
Just start with something.
Bobby, our next point here, Social Security will cover my living expenses in retirement.
Yeah.
We've heard that a couple times.
Yeah, we have. And originally, Tim, I think that was kind of the idea, right? When Social Security was first put together, almost everybody had a pension. Well, pensions have gone away now,
Sure.
and, we've got 15% of employers now offer pensions.
Yep.
So the idea was between your pension and your Social Security, you'd get pretty close to the income you had while you were working. It's just not the case anymore because the pensions have gone away.
That's right.
Right. Social Security is important, right? You want to make sure that you pay into the Social Security system, especially if you're self-employed, you got to pay double.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be the cornerstone of your income plan in retirement.
That's right.
And that's that green bucket we mentioned earlier in our bucket system. Really, you want to make sure in retirement you have secure income, right? That's the whole point. You don't want to retire with a big pile of cash. And
I do.
Well, yeah, I think a lot of people think that, right? And I know you kind of laughed and made a joke, but you want to be able to turn that asset
into
reliable income. That's the whole point of retirement. And Social Security's there. It's going to cover a fraction of what you probably need and definitely want in retirement. So you need to make sure you're coming up with other income sources in retirement.
We do have a handful of folks who were just savers their entire life, and so they never spent much, and that habit's not going to change for them in retirement. Yeah. So their Social Security actually did cover their living expenses. But what was failed to understand is that just because that covers your day-to-day living expenses doesn't mean it's going to cover the long-term care that you need down the road.
Yes.
Doesn't mean that it's going to totally keep up with inflation as we see these big hikes happen along the way. There are going to be other things that you have to spend money on, and Social Security may not keep up with all of that.
Yeah, an important one too, Tim, is when we talk to a lot of couples. I'd say most of our clients are couples.
Sure.
And Social Security again is the cornerstone of their income plan in retirement. What people often don't think about is when the first spouse passes away, you're going to lose one of those two Social Securities.
Yep.
Right, and oftentimes that's a big hit to a monthly budget for a retired couple.
Yeah, because just because your spouse passes doesn't mean that the house bill goes down, or electricity bill's probably about the same. Yeah. You may spend a little bit less on food, but all in all, that most expenses stay the same.
Yeah, it's a little mini myth that when one of the spouses passes away, your expenses go to half. It's just not the way it works, right? So you got to make sure that Social Security is taken care of, right? And there's a lot of ways to file Social Security. I think Gary shared the number a couple weeks ago. There's 500 and some odd ways to file for Social Security, and it can make a big difference. Both on the income you receive for the rest of your life, and how much you have to rely on your retirement savings.
Sure. Depending
on Social Security. So it's a big one. Social Security will cover my retirement. Likely not. That's myth number 2.
Give me myth number 3.
All right, myth number 3, real quick here before the end of the first segment, is I'll spend less when I retire.
Very rarely true.
Yeah.
Not to say it can't be, but most of the time, no. Reason being is you retire, you're spending 8 to 5, at work all day. And then when you retire, you suddenly get 9 hours back of your life. What are you going to do? You're not just going to sit at home and watch TV all day, right? And then go out for dinner. You're probably out going to see your grandkids, a couple counties away, maybe a couple states away. You want to travel and go see Europe. You pick up a new hobby. Whatever the case may be, chances are you're spending more. Not only are you spending more because you're doing more, but you're spending more because inflation continues to tick upwards, right? It's very rarely true that you're going to spend less in retirement.
Yeah, and oftentimes we work with people that, have these goals to travel or do things. A lot of times their spending goes up considerably, when they retire.
Especially in those first go-go years, right?
In the go-go years of retirement, you're still young. You still can travel. You've got all these goals. Yeah, it's not uncommon to see, spending go up considerably. And that's the stuff you want to spend money on. But to your point too, Tim, later on in life, healthcare gets more expensive. You spend more on it, it gets more expensive, and then, God forbid, the long-term care.
We have so many people who first retire, and then they've got this honey-do list that's 10 miles long that they've got to get done. Listen, I've done those honey-do lists. They're never free.
Yeah, you're right. And a lot of people, you're spending more time at home,
That's
to your
right.
point. So we have a lot of people that do house projects, right?
3 trips to Lowe's just to fix the doorknob.
That's right. All right, those are the three this segment, Tim. I appreciate it. If you are interested in retirement, some of these myths have talked to you, I want to offer you a copy of Gary Thurman's book, Plan Today, Own Tomorrow. It's a great book that talks about retirement. It talks about these myths and a lot more. To get your complimentary copy of Plan Today, Own Tomorrow, go to plantodayoffer.com. That's plantodayoffer.com, and we'll send a complimentary copy of the book right out to you. Read the book. It's a great book. Talks about a lot of these things, and then give us a call. Talk about make a complimentary meeting with us, Tim. Our meetings, first meetings are free. Kind of figure out where you are in your retirement journey, what we can do to help, and how we can get you to confidently move into retirement.
We've got a few more myths coming when you come back. We got about 2 or 3 more we're going to run through. They're pretty important ones, so stay tuned. We want to talk through those with you, share a little bit with you about what's happening in the world today and how we can fight these myths. We'll catch you when you come back.
Every year, taxes are handled the same way. You earn income, the year ends, and you file a return. That trains us to look at taxes through a rearview mirror. Retirement taxes do not always work that way. Qualified retirement accounts are generally taxed based on future income decisions and future tax rates. Once those decisions are made, flexibility may be limited. That's why tax planning often works best when done proactively, before decisions are locked in. Visit plantodaytaxbill.com or scan the QR code to use our free tax calculator and see what that potential tax liability on your qualified retirement assets could look like based on your current assumptions.
Welcome back to Plan Today, Own Tomorrow. I'm Bobby Futch. I'm here with Tim McDermott this afternoon, talking about retirement myths and misunderstandings in retirement. We talked about a couple in the first segment. I Have Plenty of Time to Plan was the first one. Social Security will cover my retirement cost was the second. And the third is, what was the third one, Tim?
We talked about spending less
in retirement. That's right there on my notes. Myth 4, we'll get right into it. I'll just work longer if I need more money.
Yeah.
I like this one. This is actually an interesting one.
It is, because we are seeing people work longer, but a lot of times it's intentional, not because they have to. Yes, this is an option. I say it's an option. Don't be forced into it. Make it an option, right?
That's exactly right.
You don't want to be in a position where you're ready to retire and then you have to go back to work for another 5 years, 10 years maybe, because you didn't have enough, you didn't save enough. Maybe the market risk took it away from you because you didn't know how aggressive you were being. That's a myth we're going to talk about in a minute. Yeah. This is an important factor to say. Planning before, retirement D-Day is going to be essential so you don't get stuck in this position.
Yeah, I'd like to go back and point out a couple of things there. You mentioned that a lot of people are, continuing to work. And when we're seeing that more and more. So, they'll retire from their, call it your corporate 9-to-5 job, that they've been doing for, decades, and find them a part-time job.
Yep.
We've got, clients that, enjoy being outside and gardening, so they work at Ace Hardware during the seasonal times, right? We got some that are, work at golf courses. They enjoy golf,
Sure.
right? It's not that they need the money, but it's that it keeps them busy, it keeps them engaged.
Sure.
And we find that a lot of people, there's a social aspect to work too. And losing that's a big change.
Sometimes it's just having a reason to get out of bed and go do something, have a purpose for the day.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, that's the positive side. We'll all continue to work.
Sure.
Great. That's an awesome decision. And if that's you, man, we support that, right?
Yep.
That's a great way to kind of transition in retirement. So it's not, one day you wake up and, man, you've got a completely free schedule, because that jars a lot of people sometimes.
Sure.
There's a flip side to that, though, Tim, is that if your retirement plan is, I'll just go back to work if I need to, sometimes that just doesn't work, right? Health surprises, caring for family. There's all kinds of things that are out of your control, that happen more and more often as you get older, that may prevent you from going back to work.
You're absolutely right, especially if you're looking to get into a high-paying job. Sometimes it can be more difficult to land that when you're closer to retirement age, because employers will look at that and say, well, they're not a long-term, employee of ours. And so it can be harder to get a high-paying job in that type of role.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, I guess the point there is if that's kind of part of your thought process, I think you probably need to come see us.
Sure.
Do a little bit of more planning so you can, even if you have to work more on the front end to take it off on the back end, I think that's the way to do it.
Yeah, if you're within 5 years of retirement, that's a great time to come in, see us, talk to us about where you're at, what you're doing, how we can position things so you don't get put in a position to have to work longer because of a market correction or because not enough has been saved, right? That gives us time to make those adjustments in the retirement plan and prepare you for retirement D-Day.
That's exactly right. Tim, I appreciate that. Those were the retirement myths we're going to talk about today. We're going to move into mistakes now. Kind of sort of the same thing, but we see these quite often, and some of these we talk about, almost every day with clients. Mistake one when preparing for retirement is investing without understanding risk. This is a huge one right now.
It is. I think I want to spend a little time on this one because risk is more than just a market correction, right? You run the risk of falling behind, not making enough to keep up with inflation and the market and other things. There's risk that is associated with interest rates when you talk about bonds. There's risk of liquidity when you talk about some different assets, right? And so there's all types of different risks. There's systematic, there's unsystematic risk, inflationary risk, right? There's all these different types of risk. And I don't care what program you go into, what investment you go into, there's a risk there. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And I think it's important to point out that you're not talking here about stock market risk, right? We'll talk
That's
about
one
that.
of them. Right?
That is
the obvious one.
Just one. But there's a lot of other things that go into your risk in your investment portfolio, and it's important to understand that wholly, right? I don't want people to think we're saying risk is bad.
Nope.
Right? You have to take risk. You just have to understand what risks you're taking and make sure that they're appropriate for you and for your plan.
It's really a trade-off at the end of the day, right? I always use this thing where the sales guy comes and knocks on your door and says, hey, I'm here to sell you X, Y, and Z. You can have your service quick. You can have your service cheap. You can have your service quality, but you only get to pick two. Which two do you want, right? Because if it's quick and it's cheap, it's not going to be quality, and vice versa for all the others. It's always a trade-off, right? And this is where we explain kind of our bucket system and how it works. If you want to be in the market, you get the growth. The potential growth is definitely there. You get the liquidity. The access is there. You can take your money and run whenever you want, but you do give up the safety aspect of things.
Yeah.
You go into the bank. That's our yellow bucket of money. If you're in the bank, your money's liquid. You can go get it as quick as possible. There's usually no waiting to get to it. We got the safety. You've got FDIC insurance. There's no market risk involved there. But you give up the potential growth, which the real risk at the end of the day there is not being able to keep up with inflation, which is why we don't say to leave a bunch there. You want to talk about the green bucket?
Yeah, you certainly lose a lot of your purchasability there when you're in the bank, right?
That's
I think,
right.
These banks are giving 0.01% on checking accounts now. It's crazy.
That's if you're a gold member, though.
That's true. Yeah, and the green bucket is the bucket we talk about that produces an income, right? So you get the safety there, and you can get the growth. You can get both of those things, but the downside of that green bucket oftentimes is limited liquidity.
Which is why we don't want to put the entire retirement plan in there.
That's
but
right.
For most folks, it makes sense to put a portion in there because you don't need access to all your money at once.
Yeah.
If you did, you wouldn't have it through the rest of retirement, and you'd be in an even worse position.
Yeah, so I think what most people, when we come down and talk about, they sit down and talk to us about their bucket strategy, you're going to have funds in each one of those buckets. They each serve a specific purpose.
Sure.
And spreading it out across those three buckets, bringing it back to mistake number one, investing without understanding risk, it helps spread those risks out. And when you label them like that, red, yellow, and green, it's really easy to talk about what risks are in each of those buckets.
Can I talk a little bit about the biggest risk I see right now, especially with people in 401k plans?
Sure. We move into mistake number two?
No, not yet. Well, it may bleed into that a little bit, but sort of, right?
Okay.
Usually when you're in a 401k plan, you're in a target date fund, right? And a target date fund is a simplified, easy way for people to not have to think about things, invest in the market, and gradually get more and more conservative the closer they get to
It's like the
retirement.
set it and forget it option, right?
That's right, yeah. The risk that you run here is that the closer you get to that retirement target date, the more that shifts from equities over to bonds. And without going too far down a rabbit hole today, you run the risk of interest rate risk and not keeping up with inflation on the bonds right now.
Yeah, yields are pretty low historically right now, right?
We had a major economic shift that happened in 2020 that no one really talks about, and we had an interest rate shift, and that affects bonds on a day-to-day basis. If you're in a target date fund in a 401k, come by and see us. I want to talk you through that. I want you to understand what's there and the risks that are involved with it, and maybe we can make it a little more beneficial for you at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's a really, really interesting time, and we'll just call it the fixed income markets now, because for, really since the 80s, people have been saying, bonds and fixed income are the safe place to be. And you can clip your coupon, you get a good income, values aren't going to change very much. Well, that's really changed now.
The conservative model.
Yeah, and so the traditional conservative model isn't too conservative anymore, in our opinion.
So mistake 2 and 3 kind of go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
You're either being too aggressive or too conservative.
Yeah, I agree with that. And most people do this not knowing, right? Because maybe even if you sit down with somebody, or you talk to your 401k manager, the company that helps you with that, you set that years ago, and things have changed. We see now people have inadvertently or unawareingly, is that a word, Tristan?
I don't know. That's
Unawareingly are too aggressive because of the run-up we've seen in the market now, right? Maybe 5-10 years ago, they had a little bit of an allocation to tech. Well, that thing has run, and we see fairly often now, folks with equity allocations to tech, 30-40%. They don't realize that. Now, that's been good, right?
Yes.
It's been where you've seen your returns in the last 5 so years.
Yep.
But we're starting to see a lot of volatility in that sector.
That's right.
And a lot of people don't realize that they're so overweighted in that sector because they've had these great returns for so long. And then to your point earlier about the target date funds, you may be too conservative and not realize it, not only giving up return, but having some risks in that portfolio that haven't been there for a long while.
I think those are great points. And this is something that's an ever-changing, field, right? Today is going to be a little bit different than tomorrow. And so working with someone who's actively managing that will help keep that in check.
If you're interested in start planning your retirement, or you're already down that pathway, I invite you to get a copy of our book, Plan Today, Own Tomorrow. It talks about all what we talked about today and a little bit more. You can go to plantodayoffer.com, plantodayoffer.com to get a complimentary copy of the book. Or if you're in the Chattanooga area, you can text the word book to 423-710-9199. If you're in the Knoxville area, that number is 865-951-7526. Either one of those numbers, text the word book, and we'll get it right out to you. When we come back, we're going to play a little bit of game, myth or fact. Stay with us, and we'll talk to you soon.
Are you really ready to retire? Have you taken the steps to make sure your income will last as long as you do? Most people think they're ready until they take the quiz. Get a complimentary retirement reality check at giaquiz.com and find out where you stand and how to move forward with confidence.
Welcome back to Plan Today, Own Tomorrow. This is Bobby Futch. I'm here with Tim McDermott, and today we are talking about retirement myths and mistakes here on Plan Today, Own Tomorrow. We're going to start with a little game here. We're going to do myth versus fact game. Tim, you ready?
I am ready.
The first one here is the stock market always comes back. Myth or fact?
I would say that has always been true. Not only has it come back, but it's always grown afterwards. We've always seen that market come back. But it doesn't mean we shouldn't worry about that. When you shift from investing into the stock market to needing to pull funds from the stock market, you have a major shift in what happens and how that math actually works in your favor. As you invest into the stock market, those dips you're buying at lower and lower points, which actually help you if you're consistent on when you're making those contributions. The opposite is also true, right? If you are pulling from those funds, you want to pull at highs, but if you're pulling at lows, you're taking kind of a double hit to that account. We call it sequence of returns risk. And so you want to be very careful about that. And that is something to be cautious about. That's why you hear everybody talk about getting more conservative as you move into your retirement years.
Yeah, I'll also point out that that is true, that the stock market always comes back. At least it always has,
That's
right? It's just a matter of how long it takes to come back.
That's right.
Right. I think most of us on this radio show remember 2008, right? It took almost 5 years for the market to get back to where it was pre-08. If you were retiring, 2006, 2007, 2008, that could really affect you. And yes, the market did come back, but you had to go through a roller coaster there if you were taking too much risk in your portfolio.
And if you just retired right there in
Yes.
2008, you're pulling money out of those accounts. I bet it took you longer than 5 years to make your money back.
Yeah, and unfortunately, some people that didn't have a good plan, you either had to push retirement for a meaningful amount of time,
Or they went back to work, Bobby.
or they went back to work.
Not
And
ideal.
Not ideal, yeah. Like we talked about in the first segment, right? They were forced to go back to work. They didn't want to do that.
All right, I've got one for you.
Okay.
If I own multiple investments, I'm fully diversified. Myth or fact?
I would say that that's probably a myth, right? It is important to own multiple investments.
What are those investments?
But what are those investments and what purpose do they serve, right? And so we talked earlier about our bucket system, our red, green, and yellow buckets. Each one of those buckets has a different type of investment in it.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to be diversified across the type of investments you have because they all serve a different purpose, right? Again, yellow is the safe money in the bank. Red is your market money. Green is your income-producing assets.
Yep.
But then you can look at each one of those buckets, and I would say, maybe the yellow bucket be the least diversified. It's a savings account. It's
Sure.
a CD at the bank, right? That's pretty simple. But in the green bucket, you're going to have, that's where your Social Security falls into. That's one source of income. That's where a properly structured fixed indexed annuity fits into, right? That they can provide that income. Then the red bucket is where most people traditionally think about diversification. And it's important in the red bucket. Don't get me wrong, but I'd say it's no more important in the red than the other two.
Sure.
But that's just traditionally where people think about diversification. You have to be really careful in the stock market. Right now, I think is a time where people have what I call recency bias.
Sure.
Tim, the stock market has been so good for so long. That's what people remember. But the stock market will correct in a meaningful way. I promise that's going to happen. Is it today?
Yeah. When
is it
the
next
question.
month?
Yep.
Is it 5 years from now? I don't know. We're historically overdue for one. So you just need to make sure that you're taking the amount of risk that's appropriate for you and then figuring out what assets in each one of those buckets get you there.
A different type of diversification would be taxability diversification.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And a lot of folks throw money into a pre-tax 401k their whole life. Having money in a Roth, having non-qualified assets can help you customize your tax picture as you move into retirement as well.
Yeah, and that's big now because we say this all the time to clients and prospects. One tax begets another tax.
That's right.
Right. So if you have to have extra income in retirement, it happens. You got to put a roof on a house. You got to buy a new car. You want to take the grandkids to Disney World. We hear everything.
You want the ability to flex where you pull that
Yeah,
money from.
and
to
if
help.
you have to pull that money from a traditional IRA, all of a sudden your taxable income goes way up, right? And that's an additional cost to those things that if you had that tax diversification, you could have probably at least had the option to stay away from.
Sure.
And we talked to everybody about Roth conversions. That's huge.
Yep.
If you're talking about taxes and Roth conversions. Question number 3, Tim. The highest investment return is always the best choice.
Fact. Let's get after it.
Oh.
No. not necessarily true. Why take on the risk that you don't need to take on? If you're looking for gains when you're young, when you're early investing, by all means, try and make the money as long as you can stomach it. If you're going to be the same person that gets those big returns and then when the losses start happening, you start making panic moves, then you're too aggressive, right? But when we're moving into retirement, we move from the accumulation phase to the preservation phase. Yeah. This takes us from, do we need to grow our money? Yeah, we probably still need some growth there, but we don't need, 15, 16, 20% returns probably. We probably need to reduce risk and take on that 8% return at the end of the day.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that go on here, right? One, if you put a retirement plan together and you have certain goals, sometimes there are return numbers that you have to target there, right? You've got to grow by an average of such an amount every year to get there, right?
Sure.
That's one thing. But then to your point, there's also, what you can stomach. We talk about risk tolerance, and risk, appetite, really. Risk tolerance is the amount of risk that your retirement plan can take and still, have a high reasonable to get there, right?
Sure.
Without taking too much risk. And then there's also, to your point, can you personally stomach the drops? And that's really important because it talks to what's called behavioral finance.
Yep.
And we see this every so often. We'll see folks that came in, I think earlier this year we met with a guy who's been very conservative since 2008, right? That's a long time.
Sure.
That's a little out there, but it's out there. 2022 did that to a lot of people where, they were making reasonably good returns and the market just absolutely turned over on them. And the losses hurt more than the gains feel good.
Yeah. Say that again,
Right.
because I like that. I like that phrase.
The losses hurt more than the gains feel good. And so what that often does to people is, they'll make, really good returns for a handful of years and then they'll see a 10% down. Mm-hmm. Is that a big deal in your plan? I don't know. That's not an unreasonable swing down, though, in the stock market, but people will get cold feet and get out at the bottom. And that's really one of the worst things you can do for a long-term plan because you're kind of just like, sealing those losses in.
That's right.
Right? Really what you need to be doing is, riding that back up, especially if you're still contributing to those plans because the ride back up, especially while you're contributing to retirement plans or savings, is where you're going to make a lot of your compound returns over time.
Yep. And you did a study not too long ago about the worst days and best days in the market. And I think it's something like 9 out of 10 of the best days in the market were followed within a 2-week stretch of the worst days in the market.
Yeah, that's really important. And it's interesting, too, because to your point, the best days in the stock market, the best single-day gains in the market, come very closely following the worst days. So that means that, if tomorrow the stock market falls 10 or 15%, and you get out, likely the best days we've seen in a long time are going to be within 14 days.
Yep.
The best asset managers in the world can't time the market.
That's right.
And so I ask everybody and say, how are you different? Right? I don't want to be rude to our listeners, but it's just a fact that if you get out of the market, the hardest thing you've got to decide is to when to get back in. And it just never happens, right? And so then you whipsaw the other way. You get out at the bottom. You miss the run, Tim, right? And you go, man, I missed the run. It's time to get back in.
Then you get aggressive.
And then you get back in at the top and rinse and repeat.
Yep.
Right? So to bring this back to what we talked about earlier and what the myth is, the highest return investment is always the best choice. It's got to be appropriate for you because you got to be able to do those. You got to be able to do those swings, and the best way you do that is figuring out the amount of risk you're willing to take, knowing that it's not some myth, right? It will happen at some point, and you've got to be okay with that, and it's got to fit your risk profile for your retirement plan.
Awesome, love it.
Yeah, that was long-winded, but I think it's important because we deal with this quite a bit.
Yes,
and again. The markets have been really good here lately, so people often forget that the markets do have a downside as well. When we come back on the next segment, we're going to talk about some listener questions. If you have a question you want to ask us, I invite you to go to giaplantoday.com. giaplantoday.com. That's our website. It's a great website. Tristan just kicked off a new website.
Looks great.
It looks great. So even if you've been there before, go back, check out Tristan's new website, send us a message, say, Tristan, your website looks awesome.
You can also see some of our other TV and radio shows over there.
Yep, you can find, it's still called the media tab, right, Tristan? He's shaking his head yes. TV, radio shows are there. There's a section down below to send your questions in so we can answer them on the radio. If you want a copy of Gary's book, Plan Today, Own Tomorrow, I invite you to go to plantodayoffer.com. That's plantodayoffer.com. Ask you a couple quick questions, and we'll get a complimentary copy of the book right out to you. You can also request that book via text. If you're in the Chattanooga area, text the word book to 423-710-9199. It's 423-710-9199. If you're up in the great white north of Knoxville, Tennessee, 865-951-7526, 865-951-7526. Stay with us here. We'll be back to answer some listening questions after the break.
Every year, taxes are handled the same way. You earn income, the year ends, and you file a return. That trains us to look at taxes through a rearview mirror. Retirement taxes do not always work that way. Qualified retirement accounts are generally taxed based on future income decisions and future tax rates. Once those decisions are made, flexibility may be limited. That's why tax planning often works best when done proactively, before decisions are locked in. Visit plantodaytaxbill.com or scan the QR code to use our free tax calculator and see what that potential tax liability on your qualified retirement assets could look like based on your current assumptions.
Welcome back to Plan Today, Own Tomorrow. Bobby Futch with Tim McDermott here with Guardian Investment Advisors. And today on the radio, we're talking about myths and mistakes. Tim pointed out we got a couple more mistakes we're going to talk about.
Was
here.
it a mistake that we missed our mistakes?
Yeah, it was mistake number 4 is that I missed the rest of the mistakes on the notes before we get into some listener questions. But these are really good, so I think we want to make sure we cover this, even if we have to push the listener questions to next week. So mistake number 4, not having a retirement income plan.
Yeah. This happens a lot. You go down, you see your local advisor at the corner shop. I won't say any names. Mm-hmm. And you talk to them about retirement planning. They're like, yeah, we'll do this investment and this investment. And they look right over the income plan. They look right over the tax plan. They look right over long-term care and everything else that goes into it. That's not planning, that's investing. Investing's important. You're here to make money. You're here to do it reasonably safe. But without the income plan, you could be costing yourself more and more money, not being able to keep up with inflation, not being able to stay on top of the tax situation that's there. A lot of times I will see an income plan that was built by someone else, and there's nothing but a gross number there. It just says, hey, you're going to get this much. From where? What taxability is that? How does that affect the other incomes that you have coming in? All of that is going to make a difference. Our income plan is very good. It takes into account the ups and downs of different types of income flows and the taxability of it as well.
Yeah, I think it's important to talk about, everybody has a retirement plan, right? That's important, but that retirement plan is made up with a bunch of different things in it, to your point, right? You need to have a tax plan. You need to have an income plan. You need to have an investment plan. You need to have an estate plan. All these things go into a proper retirement plan. And the one that we see that's overlooked the most, because I would say it's one of the most difficult to put together and do well, is an income plan.
Sure.
Right. Where am I going to get my money that I can spend in retirement?
That's right.
And then we're going to talk a little bit about this, but man, healthcare costs are a big deal in retirement. Even if you're relatively healthy, and then God forbid that long-term care creeps up later on in life, you need to have an income plan that anticipates that, because you're going to need that higher income in the future. You just don't know when that's going to be.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
So no retirement income plan. That's a big mistake.
Bobby, mistake number 5. Claiming Social Security without a strategy.
Yeah, this is a big one. And we probably spend more time than most talking about this because it's been my experience. I always talk about my past life, right? I've done this for a long time.
Sure.
I just had my 2-year anniversary with Guardian Investment Advisors.
Hey.
And
Did we get him a cookie or a cake or anything? No.
I got told to get to work. No, I'm kidding. It's an important, we call this all the time, a cornerstone of your income plan, right? It shouldn't just be dismissed as, take it whenever you're ready.
Sure.
Or take it when you're 70 because you get an 8% roll-up. I may have been guilty of that years ago in a past life, right? Because you see that 8% number and you go, man, that's great. You know, that's more than the average return of the S&P 500. But man, there's so much more that goes into it than that. One, because it's not a compounding number, right? It's just 8% from your full retirement age. And then if you need the money, Tim, right, to spend, to keep the lights on, to go on vacation, to play golf, to do whatever you want to do in retirement, if you're not taking Uncle Sam's money, which is really your money, but if you're not taking Uncle Sam's money, where do you get it from? You're getting it from your retirement savings.
Yeah. Now your retirement savings aren't growing because you pulled them out and spent them.
That's right.
There's a compound interest there that is not working in your favor. At the beginning of the show, I talked about how important compound interest was in starting that investment process early. Well, pulling money out early that's unnecessary can hurt you in the same exact way.
Yeah, and there are so many calculators online that are supposed to help you figure out the best time to take Social Security.
They all ignore that.
They all ignore that. They're what I call Social Security maximizers, right? And it really says, how can I get the biggest dollar figure back from Uncle Sam? And that's good, right? That's just part of the equation.
Sure.
But again, if you're waiting to maximize the amount of money you might get back from Uncle Sam, you're having to rely on other income sources. So you're maximizing a number that might come and reducing the amount of savings you have. So a break-even analysis is what they call that usually. It's half the picture. You got to think about what you're spending that can no longer grow.
Somebody very smart put the Social Security system together, believe it or not. Now, is it operated smartly? That's a different conversation. This is a different radio show, Bobby. But think about it this way. There's a reason that Uncle Sam gave you an 8% roll-up, because they know the longer they hold on to your money, the more that they can use it for other things. And the same would be true back to you.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Another couple important things with Social Security strategy, not just when you take, but spousal planning, right? That's an important one, and it kind of surprises me. I won't say it surprises me. It really makes me happy when I can tell people that there's a spousal benefit out there. You know, because it's not very uncommon that, you know, we'll have one spouse that was, you know, the primary wage earner, and they've got a really healthy Social Security benefit, you know, and maybe one stayed at home to raise kids or whatever it is. They just don't have as strong of a Social Security benefit. You're actually entitled to either your benefit or up to half of your spouse's benefit.
That's right.
Right. So even if you didn't work a day in your life, Tim, right? Some days it's debatable around here whether you're working or not. But you could get half of Joel's Social Security benefit, right, even if you didn't work. And so that's important. Even if you don't have a very strong record or you didn't work, there's a benefit there for you based on your spouse. So that's important. Oftentimes we can get a little higher benefit for a spouse that was a lower income earner. Survivor benefits are important too, right? You will lose one of your Social Security benefits when the first spouse passes away.
The lesser of the two.
The lesser of the two. And so there's going to be, you know, an income gap there that your retirement income plan for mistake number 4 needs to take into account. Last mistake, Tim, and this is a big one, ignoring taxes.
Yeah, I kind of talked about this in the income planning process. If you don't know the taxability of the income source, or you don't understand the taxability of what's going to happen when you leave it to your kids, your grandkids, it can really change what you thought may happen. We've seen a handful of folks come in and say, "Hey, Tim, Bobby, I made, you know, this much, and I've got $1 million in my 401k."
Yeah.
And congratulations, you've done well. I'm happy for you. But do you really have $1 million in there? Because you owe a portion of that to Uncle Sam. Do you know what amount that is? Right? And it's a conversation of how do you get that out with paying the least amount of taxes, and it doesn't all belong to you at the end of the day.
Yeah, and RMDs are a big thing for folks too, right? So right now, age 73, that'll extend to age 75. Uncle Sam will start making you take money out of those pre-tax IRAs and 401ks. Does that matter to you? Probably. You know, if you're going to start taking money out of those accounts early, or earlier than 73 or whatever your RMD age, you know, okay. But we meet with folks every once in a while that, you know, don't necessarily need or want to, or they don't want to take that much, right? You're going to be forced to take, you know, almost 4% out the first year.
Sure.
And so the earlier you get started doing tax planning, there are strategies, you know, that you can use to mitigate that, whether that's Roth conversions, whether that's qualified charitable distributions out of an IRA. There are ways to make sure that more of that money goes to where you want it to go and out of Uncle Sam's pocket. Last thing I think we should say on this is that tax rates right now are the third lowest they've ever been in the United States.
Great point.
Right? No one likes paying taxes. I get it. But you're not getting out of it, right? And if you're going to have to pay taxes, do you want to do it at the third lowest rate, or do you want to do it at some unknown rate in the future?
Right.
And that's the biggest thing that we're talking to people about now. Over $39 trillion worth of debt in the United States. We're adding, $2 million worth of debt a minute. We just bought many billions of won, you know, the United States did,
Yen.
you know.
Yeah.
Yen, I'm sorry. Yen. It's one of those things that, like, it just keeps going up.
Yes. Yeah.
And so at some point, they're going to have to pay for that.
Yep.
The federal government is, and the only way that the federal government has revenues is income taxes.
Right.
So if you think tax rates are high now, I'd say wait and see it in the future. So if you can do Roth conversions, you can do qualified charitable distributions, you can have a tax diversified retirement portfolio. It's just going to help serve you and your family better in the future.
Don't wait. Come see Bobby and Tim. We'll talk to you guys about how to get Uncle Sam paid and out of your pocket.
We talked about a lot of retirement myths and a lot of retirement mistakes today. If you are interested in talking about any of these, you know, give us a call. We're happy to have a meeting with you. Tim and I meet with you here in our Chattanooga office, Brogan Walters up in Knoxville. This is what we help people through every day. First meeting is just a conversation. Let's answer some questions. Let's get to know each other, see if we can't help each other get through this retirement journey. I invite you to get a copy of Gary's book, Plan Today, Own Tomorrow. Again, that book is full of great retirement information, goes in depth about a lot of the things we've talked about today and more. You can get that by going plantodayoffer.com. Go to plantodayoffer.com to get a copy of the book. You can also send a text message. Text the word book in Knoxville. Text the word book to 865-951-7526. If you're in the Chattanooga area, that number is 423-710-9199. I appreciate you being with us this week for Plan Today, Own Tomorrow. I'm Bobby Futch, Tim McDermott. Hope everybody has a great week. We'll see you next week on the radio.
Cheers.